Good evening, girls. I welcome you all to our lecture. This is for the students of English Honours Semester 3, paper number 5, American Literature, and this is going to cover Unit 3, Edgar Allan Poe's The Purloined Letter. Let us begin. Edgar Allan Poe was born in the year 1809 and he died at somewhat young age of 40 in the year 1849. In his 40 years, he has made a permanent place for himself in American as well as the world literature. He is known to be a short story writer, a poet, an editor as well as a literary critic. But out of all these things, he is best known for his short stories and poems. He gets the credit for inventing the detective story, the genre of detective story. Now, Edgar Allan Poe really showed what can be done with the form. His short stories can be divided into a variety of genres. The three genres that we have are Gothic or horror fiction, science fiction, and detective fiction, or he also termed it as tales of ratiocination. This particular term, tale of ratiocination, was termed by Edgar Allan Poe or coined by Edgar Allan Poe, and it basically refers to detective fiction. Throughout his lifetime, he has written a total of 66 short stories, 70 poems, and a couple of essays. Now, what is interesting to note about Edgar Allan Poe's Tale of Ratiocination is that the particular story and the clues presented by the writer is not just for the detective, but for the reader as well. He very interestingly engages the reader in the story. Clues are available for both detective and the reader to solve, and Poe is the one person who has developed many standard features for detective fiction. Poe had published 3 groundbreaking stories with his character C. Auguste Dupin. He is the lead detective in 3 of his well-known and famous short stories, and the famous detective of Arthur Conan Doyle, Sherlock Holmes, with whom a lot of us are familiar with, was modeled on Dupin. Doyle had based his character of Sherlock Holmes inspired by the character of Dupin. Dupin had featured earlier in The Murders of the Rue Morgue and The Mystery of Mary Rogette. Coming to the story prescribed in your syllabus, The Purloined Letter. Now, the word purloined means stolen. So the story is all about a stolen letter and how the detective ultimately solves that crime of that stolen letter. This was the 3rd story of the series, and the work, The Purloined Letter, was published in a magazine called as The Gift, a Christmas and New Year's present for 1845, which was published in the year 1844, the December edition. It featured this particular story, The Purloined Letter. The Purloined Letter is known to be the finest work of ratiocination or detective fiction of Poe. There are certain reasons behind it. Poe employs most effectively the principle of ratiocination. He solves a problem very logically. It is believed that the character of Dupin was based on a real person. He was supposed to be, or is assumed to be, based on the French police chief called Eugene Francois Vidocq. In most of the tales of detective fiction, we find that there is a presence of 3 unequal figures. 2 are central to the template of detective fiction. The first of these is the detective, the second is the narrator and detective's aide, and the third is the client, which could be a private individual or it could also be the police. The narrator, we find, is a stand-in for the reader who leads the reader through the crime scene. He is the person who reports everything that he sees. He shares insights about the detective and so on without actually solving the crime. So he's basically supplementing the role of the reader. The detective is the prime exemplar of superior intellect. in this case, we have C. Auguste Dupin, who not only sees just as the narrator does, but observes, interprets, and ultimately solves the crime. The client is the one who brings to the attention of the detective peculiar or strange problems that bring the detective out from his world of contemplation into the world of action. So he comes up with a problem to the detective so that he can solve it. Dupin solves the crime by following the criminal's mind in the same fashion as he read his friend or the narrator's mind. The story of the Purloined Letter is quite interesting, and there is a little bit of background to be covered, or that information has to be kept in your mind so that it will help you understanding better what the story is going to be about. Now, the Purloined Letter can be explained as a letter which contained some delicate information that had been stolen or purloined. What had happened was, an important woman was in her boudoir. A boudoir is a kind of a woman's chamber, her bedroom, or it can also mean a private room. When the letter arrived, and the letter was presumably from the man that she was having an affair with. As she was reading the letter, her husband enters into the room. Seeing her husband, what she does is that she places the letter on the table in front of her. At the same time, a minister, the full name of the minister is not known and he is referred to as Minister D. Now, that Minister D enters into the boudoir and spots the letter and recognizes the handwriting of the letter present on the letter. Based on the handwriting, he guesses the lady's scandalous affair. So, what he does is that he produces a letter of his own and he places it beside the incriminating letter on the table. While talking to the lady and her husband, what he does is that he discreetly, very slyly, picks up the other letter, the one which belonged to the lady, in full view. The lady sees him do it, but she was unable to draw attention to it because of the sensitive contents of the letter. After this incident, what the Minister D does is that he uses this letter to blackmail the lady. And this lady is the client for this particular detective fiction, the Purloined Letter. She goes to the prefect of the Paris police, and since that prefect is unable to solve the crime on his own and find that letter on Minister D, he had gone to Dupin for help. Now, the story, The Purloined Letter, begins with a Latin quote by Seneca, Nil sapiente Odysseus acumen nimio, which can be translated as, nothing is more hateful to wisdom than excessive cleverness. What is actually meant by that? Seneca wanted to express that even wisdom has its limits. This is what he wanted to say. Wise men were also called as philosophers, and they always used to declare that they know everything and there is no one who can fool them. But because, according to Seneca, something that one can equate to wisdom is cleverness. Like cleverness is almost on the same level as wisdom of a person. That is why wisdom or the wise man hates it more than anything else. No quote would be more appropriate for Edgar Allan Poe's story, The Purloined Letter, than that from Seneca. The reason being that only the detective Dupin, who is looking for the truth, is able to find it because he does not underestimate the gifts of his enemy. He does not underestimate the cleverness of Minister D as the Paris police does. He does not think himself to be a wise man, but he thinks himself to be clever. And this is a gift which is sometimes more important than being wise. So, this brings us to an end to the introduction of this particular story, The Purloined Letter. There will be a following part which will be continued, and the explanation and the reading of the text will be done simultaneously. Thank you.